What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Next Gen Sales Leader Podcast. My name's Ben Reed. I'm here with Gabe Lullo, the Chief Executive Officer of Alleyoop.io. They are a managed SDR service, and he's here to tell us all about the managed SDR world. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Benjamin Reed. And your last name is a lot easier to say than mine, so that's an easy one. But I'm a huge fan of you and the show, and thanks so much for having me on, man. This is going to be fun.
Thanks a bunch. So why don't you give us the 10,000 foot view? You know, I know you're SDR to CEO. You've kind of done the entire hero's journey, so to speak. And I love that idea. We're all on a journey, and you're a perfect example for SDRs all around the world of what's possible if you actually, go through that journey. So we'd love to hear, how did you get there and what's the backstory or anything you want to share?
Yeah, long story short, I was 11 years old, and I realized if I actually could talk, I can make money. I'd realized sales was something for me. It was funny because there was a fundraiser in my school for our local aquarium, and we had to sell T-shirts to raise money for our aquarium. And I sold 22 shirts to my uncle. And I don't know how I did it, but I realized, oh my God, talking equals money. And I come from a blue collar town in Buffalo, New York, and all my friends and aunts, uncles, and cousins, everyone had to lift heavy things or smell like fish from a restaurant at the end of the day to make money. And I realized, wow, you can talk and make money. This is amazing. So sales is really right up my alley. And started off as an SDR, got into recruitment, got into training, but I was always on the road, and then I became a single dad. So what happened was like I needed to find something to take me off the road, right? This is pre-Zoom and pre-conference calls and face-to-face. Everything was face-to-face. So I had to be on the road a lot. So I was looking at inside sales, and I found this company, and, it was very, very small, less than 10 people. And the founder said, hey, I really need someone to make an impact on our SDR floor. So I actually started again and started as an SDR here. And that was over a decade ago. And now, I've had the fortunate opportunity to rise up and now be CEO of the company. So that's my story.
Very cool. So I want to know more. So this
Okay.
is where it gets interesting. So you start with 10 people. What year was that?
That was in 2013.
2013. And you started as an SDR. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. And my goal, because I had the recruitment experience and recruitment background, my intention was to build the team, come in and be really more of a recruiter slash trainer of the sales team, but they just weren't big enough yet. So I had to come in, make my mark. And I never did inside sales, software, appointment setting before. And so that was still very new. And the way I did prospecting early on, 10 years earlier, was more on the recruitment side, kind of business development, full cycle sales type of role. So exclusive prospecting and straight up cold calling was absolutely new to me.
Got it. So I'm going to define some terms that are really obvious to you and me,
Sure.
but we have a broad range of people that listen, everyone from the brand new newbie who doesn't know sales at all the
Yeah.
way to the senior CRO and someone like yourself. So sales development representative is an SDR for everyone who's listening. Can you say more about that? What do you think the SDR role is and how is it defined in your world?
Yeah, look at it. I'm a car guy, and I love, this analogy because it relates to me, but it's like the assembly line, right? Like 10, 15 years ago was marketing and then sales. And that was the sales journey, right? Marketing created demand and leads, and sales sold those leads and closed deals. But what was found is that those sellers who are getting top dollar and really expected to close business and generate revenue and do demos and negotiate deals were actually spending 70 and 80% of their day prospecting, picking up the phones, reaching out to people, getting attention, booking appointments. And the SDR function was really created at that time where it's, you know what, let's add another step in the assembly line. And instead of it just being marketing or just being sales, let's put sales development in between those two things. And then let's pass leads and interest to that team and let them exclusively focus on prospecting, which gives them an opportunity to start learning the sales game, right? And then they can grow their career into a full cycle seller. But it gives those sellers, time on doing what we expect of them, which is presenting, doing demos, and closing deals. So that's where that SDR sales development role was really born. And that's what we do all day, every day.
And who do you think this is a good fit for? So if you had to choose like a company type of all companies on planet Earth, because we get mostly in the B2B space. We don't really focus in B2C, although certainly I've seen SDRs in the course selling world, B2C. Where do you think SDRs as a role compared to, say, full cycle sales reps, or not having any SDRs at all? Where do you think they fit? What kind of company?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really depends on ROI, right? These are people, right? So it's not cheap. It's expensive, if you will, when it comes to actually the investment itself. Because I don't think you should do it, half-ass, right? You just don't hire someone and give them a list and say, good luck, get them, kid. You need to enable it. You need to manage it. You need to train it. You need to treat it like its own department. So that takes a lot of time, energy, and money. So if the ROI is there in your ACV and you're looking at the revenue side of it, it needs to make sense. But when it comes to what type of company we can work with or what type of industry, we're completely industry agnostic. We have Peloton, ZoomInfo, Orem, SalesLoft. We were the founding SDR team for those companies. And then we have two guys in an idea that want to bring their product to market, but they don't know if they have product market fit. They don't know what their competition looks like. They don't know what features make sense for the market. So we can gain all that knowledge just by having conversations with people, and then of course, passing those leads over to them. So professional services, technology, data, cybersecurity, there really is an unlimited opportunity. And so we call ourselves industry agnostic, but if there's an appointment or a demo in your sales journey and you don't want your sellers spending their time finding those leads and there's not a significant influx of inbound leads, then SDRs potentially make sense.
Do you guys do actual outbound cold calls as well, or is it pure inbound SDR?
We made 11 million cold calls last year. So cold calling is very much a part of what we do. It's actually our sweet spot. We don't just focus on LinkedIn or email, even though it absolutely is very important in outbound functions. But where we come in is that people, human to human, prospecting and cold calling effort for sure.
I'm really glad we get to talk because it seems like the only conversation I'm having in the last 6 months has been how is Clay and cold email and outbound lead gen breaking the world, and how the SDR role is dead, and there's these things called AI SDRs. I even had the CEO of AI SDR, literally the company, on the
Mhm.
podcast. And so everyone thinks AI is coming for these guys, and I think you and I would both agree that's just not true given our own experience. But I'm I'm a old school door knocking, cold calling guy. I used to have literally a pad of paper, like a bunch of leaflets. They weren't even connected. That's how old school it was. And they'd have the actual prospects printed out on the paper with the phone number. And I had an old rotary style phone. I know it's crazy. I was working at a nonprofit when I was 19, and we would dial the stupid number. And it's stupid in the sense that it's like I'm literally going through like a 1980s, and we would dial it, and that's how I cut my teeth. And I would make 160 dials a night, just doing that over and over again.
Yeah.
And then I got to door knocking. But what I found was, man, it works. If you have the right number and you have a good offer and you have a good pitch and you're decent and you're smooth on the phone, then you can get quick results. And for some reason, especially I think with the more recent generation coming out of college, they're not used to phone calls. They're not used to talking to people. And so the art of over the phone sales, I think, is slowly being kind of lost. And I will say that even going into my own clients, where I go in and, some of them are very proficient SDRs. They have 40, 50, 60 SDRs, and they're really great. But there's others that have like tiny little SDR teams, 5 or 6, and all they are is email jockeys. They're
Yeah.
appointment setters. And I feel like it doesn't do the SDR role justice. So I'm curious, how do you guys keep the SDR mission alive, knowing how impactful it is, but it's not as cool as it used to be,
Sure.
say 10 years ago or
Yeah.
15 years ago? How are you guys dealing with that?
Yeah. And you're right. 10, 15 years ago, it was very different. We were hiring kids out of college, bartenders, people with hustle, right? And they knew nothing. And we taught them everything because there wasn't anything to teach them other than how to talk, right? There wasn't outreach. There wasn't sales loft. There wasn't Orem. There wasn't Nooks. There wasn't dialers. There wasn't, Zoom into databases. Like all of the tools and the enablement side of things. And most of those companies where we were the SCR team before when they started, it's very different today. So what we say and what we're telling people and what we're seeing is that, yes, AI is absolutely going to replace people who are just putting people in email sequences. that is done. If you're an SDR and you're doing that, and by the way, there's still SDRs making 90K a year, putting people in email sequences. And if that's what you do, your days are numbered. But the people who are enabled, business acumen, like almost as if you are as talented and as experienced as an AE, not back then, now, those are going to be the next wave of SDRs. We don't find new people who've never done this before. We find SDRs who've been maybe treated badly, misplaced, due to the marketplace, or individuals who just don't want to be having the high pressure of big quotas and closing big deals and long sales cycles, and like a more transactional, like predictable commission check, right? And it's a little bit more punchy to do that. So we are attracting those types of SDRs, but they are using AI to enable them. We look at AI as a co-pilot, right? As opposed to a replacement for those SDRs. And that's how we're doing it for sure.
Yeah, I think the skills on the phone is everything.
Right.
And I will say, I remember I was at a conference. Now, this is about a year ago.
Sure.
But I can't remember the app. It was like Air something.
Okay.
But it was a cold calling SDR, and everyone is still trying to pitch me on this. Somebody was on the podcast a few weeks ago from Signal, and they have a cold calling SDR AI voice. Do I think it will get there? Yeah, I do. Now, do I think it will be really great for enterprise level applications? I think that's to be seen. I don't know, maybe 5-10 years from now, maybe. It depends. And I'm always open to being wrong. But in my experience, because I've tried to break these things, and every single time I will break it. Because I ask kind of abrupt questions like, I'm not free. Or like, who's this? What are you doing? Like that kind of like abrupt objection.
Yeah.
Or like just distracted, like, yeah, totally got it. Hey, honey, can you get me, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's like the AI just gets broken by those kind of offbeat edge cases. And my problem is that in my world, it's usually high ticket, it's usually enterprise or at least high mid-market. And it's a relationship where you are trying to build a buying committee. And if you burn one stakeholder in the buying committee, you're not killing the deal, but you're really hurting yourself. And so for me, it's like, it's not worth the risk just because I can say, save the $4,000 on the human on the base. It's like, so what, it's like, but I'm actually sacrificing the quality of the conversion and also my brand. I think at the end of the day, if you have 1,000 people or 10,000 people in your market, fine. But if you have a small 400 person TAM and you have enterprise level account-based marketing, one wrong dial can crush you. So I'm with you. I 100% agree.
Yeah, I just wrote an article, "Don't Burn Your Brand." It's literally what was the title. And it's like, how many AI emails are we getting saying, hey, I saw you went to the University of Hartford. Do they still at Spring Fling? Oh, by the way, buy my CRM. Like, yes, is it going to get better? For sure. Is it going to be more personalized and relevant? For sure. Like, that's coming. And it's, a lot of companies already have that, but many don't. But when it comes to that large enterprise, when it comes to making sure that you're sophisticatedly putting the right people in the room. I mean, just for this point, like we're seeing the CFO in more upfront part of the sales cycle at the top of the funnel than ever before, just due to the economic landscape that we're in. And at the end of the day, like, is AI really going to be able to ask the right questions and strategically know to put that person in that right room? And like I said, it'll be there for sure. Do I see it there now? Not in B2B as much as I do in more B2C or more customer service or inbound type qualifications.
Yeah, totally. I think like B2C kind of like real estate courses, like service-based stuff at the local level, like if you're like a landscaping service, maybe. And I don't even know, like, I'm sure there's going to be laws that come up around this that's not allowing that. I'm sure there's already robo-dial calls that are already prevented to some degree. I remember when I was working in politics, we would send out robo-dial calls at like, small penny a piece or something like that. But we would litter an entire city with, hey, this is, that kind of message. So it's just a more advanced version of that. And I would be interested in, as they get more advanced, testing it on a small case. But right now, I just personally think it's too multi-channel. You have to be on LinkedIn. You got to be in, various parts of your world, your owned communities. So for me, I have an owned school community, whether it's, in the CRM as a follow-up, whether it's on social, whether it's through text message. I just don't trust an SDR to put all those, an AI SDR, to put all those pieces together, even though people are claiming it. So I think it's one of those things where the claims, the believability of the claims on AI SDRs are not keeping up with the hype. So for me, I'm firmly still in human SDR camps. I think we should have another follow-up talk in a year from now
Yeah,
and see what's changed.
I agree. It's funny. I was on John Barros's podcast in 2003, and it was like right when things started talking about AI. And then I just had him on my podcast last week, and he's like, "Hey, okay, it's been 2 years, right? And like we should definitely do that." And it's interesting because we've seen a lot of people, bring up the hype or late 2003, right? And then now it's like, yeah, that's probably the greatest idea. And so we're noticing that too for sure. But the way we look at it is, you said the word, and it's trust. People like buying from people because people trust people. And right now, in my opinion, what's more powerful than anything is content. We're in the TikTok world, we're in the YouTube world, we're in the podcast world. Like people want to know who you're talking to on the other end. Before it was all calls, there wasn't a video to video. Video phone calling was like the coolest thing in the world a few years ago. And now it's commonplace, So at the end of the day, that human interaction is what people are yearning for. And that's what's building trust. And to me, as soon as I know that it's AI, especially those ones that pretend that it's not or don't be upfront that it is AI, as soon as I find out that they're trying to like dupe me in some way, boom, I'm gone. I lose zero trust and credibility. And so that's really important, in my opinion, is that trust factor, that human factor. And we're definitely seeing that in the world of content these days.
So what I'm actually putting together a new educational deck for my school community right now, and it's on conversion rates by the different outbound channels that we focus on, which is cold email, cold LinkedIn, and cold calls.
Mm-hmm.
And there's typical conversion rates. I'm very curious to find out what you think the conversion rates are based upon perhaps industry or company type in a moment. But the point I'm getting at here is that the single biggest thing that you can do to improve conversion rates on any cold outbound channel is demand generation, which is fundamentally thought leadership, content, brand salience. And so I even have like a little chart, which is like, what is the company brand salience? What is the founder brand salience? What is the salesperson's brand salience?
Love that.
And people just think of like the company as the primary brand that matters. And you see this happening with like big box, like Salesforce type of apps, where you have this crusher of a salesperson, and then they go to a startup and they have no brand salience at that level, and they suck. And it's like, what happened? Well, it's that guy was good because he had this great brand behind him. And so for me, like the number one thing any sales rep can do is start producing content and just building up that following on LinkedIn. Because I can say personally, and this, I see this for all of my clients too, but for me personally, I only really started truly investing, like truly investing in brand. I want to say this is kind of crazy to say, 3 months ago. I've been on all the social platforms for years. I've been on LinkedIn. I've had, say, 5,000, 6,000 followers on LinkedIn, nothing crazy, up until about 4 months ago. And then finally, what switched for me as I was like, you know what? I'm going to just do a test for a few months, and I'm going to put out a piece of content per day on LinkedIn. I'm going to really focus in on my podcast again, this podcast, and I'm going to see what happened. And it's absolutely crazy what happened. I went from around 5,000 or so followers. I'm at 13,000 followers. I went from having 2 to 3 likes per post. Now I'm getting anywhere from 30 to 500 likes per post with 1,800 comments. And went from 50 people in my school community to 900 people in my school community in the last 3 weeks.
Wow.
And I can say that my conversion rates have doubled.
Right.
It's like the craziest thing. All my outbound channels, whether it's cold calls or anything, as long as it's on my ICP list and I'm retargeting people that see my content, I walk into doors now. And so I was always like a believer in content. I always rationalized, I'm good at cold calling. I'm good at, whatever outbound channel. I'm like the ninja in the dark. Nobody sees. They don't need to know who I am. I'm going to go make several $1 million cold calling, and that's it. But I can see now that like having a good brand,
Yeah.
it 10x is everything. So
Right.
obviously that's why we're here. And I want to get your take on that because I asked you, about your podcast philosophy and why you even spend time doing this stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, when I was brought in as CEO from more of the operator role. I, like you, had 2,000 followers on, LinkedIn. I was crickets. And I, started looking at, the big names and partnered up with, great friends like John Burroughs, as I mentioned before, and Keenan and a few others. And I'm like, you guys, what are you guys are doing? It's like content, content, content. And so we are seeing the same thing you're seeing. We've been doing it a couple of years longer, but we had looked at it as a company, and it's about, like to your point, is building the brand for everyone in our company. Our sellers are building their brand. My AEs have 20,000 followers on LinkedIn. I have SDRs that have 15, 20,000 followers. And the reality is like the better you are at creating content right now, genuinely good content, is what's going to create that trust, build that bridge. And then when you do make that call, because it's not just an influx of inbounds coming in all day long. Like people think like, oh, I'm going to post 3 times on LinkedIn and then all of a sudden I'm going to get deals lined up. No, it's about, calling with credibility and leveraging content with your outbound action and items. And that's what we're doing right now. So we have a very, very, very tight and specific content strategy where it's not just me, right? Like, there's a lot of founders out there that, they're the deal. And I respect that, but it's about, sharing the wealth of the content and bringing it across our entire operations, sales, recruitment, teams, client success. And that's what's really been driving a significant amount of our growth. To your point, we saw about 40% now of our new business is coming in through content creation, podcast creation, partners referrals, all coming through social. So it's definitely a huge piece for us.
I remember the first time, ironically, like I was really early to the game. I had oil and gas. I cut my teeth in for-profit sales and oil and gas, marketing, and then software. Long story, we don't have to go down that path, but I had this agency called Shale Plays Media, which turned into a transition to something called Energy Media Group. And we were like one of the first people, I can't believe it, in the oil and gas industry, of all places, that was like, we had a 40-page pitch deck on why content marketing mattered.
Yeah.
And I was really early to the game. I just didn't eat my own dog food at the time.
Right.
Now, what we did was we had a bunch of oil and gas publishing companies. So we owned, this isn't going to mean anything to anyone, but for the oil and gas industry, this is significant, which was we had Marcellus.com and Haynesville.com and Bakken.com. But these, at the time, and even now, these were shale plays, which is the epicenters, the primary place where oil and gas in North America occurs. And so these publications were extremely valuable. We had hundreds of thousands of visitors. We were ranked 30,000th at the top trafficked websites in the world, which for an oil and gas niche publication is wild.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our content strategy. So it wasn't like, it was at the company level, not so much the individual brand level. And so I understood that. I understood company brand salience. I didn't understand individual brand salience. And that's what really took me so long to like come around to.
Right.
And what we found was when I transitioned to say other companies, and I would still do like documents for the company, I was trying to make the company look good. But in the process of me creating, say, a pitch demo or a webinar or something, and I'd put it out and I'd send it to people, I got some crazy responses that shocked me. This is like 2016, 2017, where people would walk into my office, somebody I'd been pitching for a while, and I'd have people come up and like glad hand me and shake my hand, and they'd be like, I just got to say, I really appreciate the work you're doing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And it was just because they watched a piece of content. It was an hour long. They got a lot of value from it. And it's crazy what it does when people meet you after digesting a content piece from you before meeting you. It's
Right.
like almost like meeting a celebrity. It's a weird human thing. And so I'm just saying that because I think it's helpful for people who are listening who don't have that brand or haven't started building it. Once you start putting out pieces of content, there will be people at some point that say to you, you are changing my life.
Yeah.
I had done something that I would have never done if you had not said that thing. And so it's just important to know that even on a small level, you can make a big difference just by putting out some content.
Yeah, it happened to me. It was the weirdest experience ever. And I actually was going into my barber and my wife was with me and I was walking down the street and literally, this is no joke. And it was the weirdest thing that ever happened to me. And this woman pointed at me like 5 feet from my face and said, "You're that guy from LinkedIn." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Oh my God, here we go." Like my wife, right? She's like, "This is going to be great." But And then they came up to me like, listen, I just started off as an SDR and I'm on your newsletter. And I took a look at, I watch your videos all the time. And, I listen to everything you say and thank you so much because it's really helped my career. And I'm like, wow. And it blew me away. And it actually gave me the fuel to, continually do this because at the end of the day, you're like, okay, I'd spent all this time on content and, is it really helping? And that definitely reaffirms those things. And then when you see the revenue start coming in because of it as well, it is definitely a double-edged sword in a good way.
Yeah, I think that's the challenging part for a lot of people is that
Yeah.
there is a like a big overarching question, which is it worth it? I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
like it's like like should I really do this? And
Right.
I actually have on my board, I have a little whiteboard here, and I'm only allowed to do 3 things every single day.
Okay.
One is prospect ReviOps, which is my new software company, and sell if I am on sales calls for my agency, Next Gen Sales Systems. Second thing is make content, so I can social podcast, school, and playbooks. I'm allowed to create content. And the third thing is fulfill for clients. But before I got clear on those 3 priorities, which is prospect, content, fulfill, I used to give myself such a hard time when I would go to like write a LinkedIn post or film a video. And I'd be like, why am I doing this? This is
Yeah.
like, it was just like an annoying secondary thing.
Right.
And I finally got clear with myself and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go all in and we're going to see what happens. And so now when I spend 3 to 4 hours a day creating content, which again, playbooks or pitch decks or podcasts like this, I don't feel like strange about it anymore. I don't feel like I'm wasting my time. And when I kind of had faith, I just like, which is a weird word to say because I'm so logical and I'm like, I need to see the results immediately. But I'll put out a piece of content and all of a sudden I'll get like a random lead where somebody will say, I saw you on some podcast or some short or something. I'll be like, dude, I did that. That wasn't even like when I committed to this. That was like a
Right.
year ago.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that the content's working for you 24/7 and it will come back in weird ways that you never even thought about. And it starts to kind of mold together. So
Sure.
I just tell everyone like, look, commit to it, invest 40 to 50% of your time into it. And that sounds crazy, but I think that's true at this point. And then just let it just mature like good wine. And just it doesn't matter, even if your content strategy is not perfect, you're going to screw it up for the first year anyways. So just
Right.
start. It's kind of Gary V-esque, but I really believe in that too now.
I couldn't agree more, man. You're absolutely like, you're talking my language. I always say like it's 2 things right now for me and it's calls and content. Creating content and then the follow up and then do those introductions, which are number 1 and number 2, obviously on your list. That for sure. If you're in go to market or if you're building a business or you're, a founder and you're looking to bootstrap, like that's what you should be doing right now. Don't go hire a VP of sales, do prospecting and do content. And then, find out if that service or offering is hitting the hearts of your clients.
100%. I was just actually on a pitch or I was on a sales call for somebody who was pitching a service and they call it the biz dev show or something like that. And their whole spiel is start a podcast to then invite prospects to the podcast so that you build a relationship and then every other conversation afterwards helps. I haven't actually been doing that for this podcast, but it's an interesting idea. And so one of the things we're going to actually try as an offer on a cold email, because I know other people that do this through cold email now,
Sure.
which is go come up with our ICP list of our ideal clients and just, the CMOs, the owners, and just say, hey, would love to have you on the podcast and just talk shop. And there's no like hidden like agenda. Like I
Right.
actually generally want to talk to anybody who's doing sales and marketing. And if it happens to be at the end where it's like, hey man, by the way, if you know anybody who's interested in these services, it's a very natural ask. And it doesn't have to be forceful, but if people like you and they resonate and there's something to do together, I found that like, even when I'm not trying, it like shit starts to happen.
Right.
So it's an interesting thing where I even said to some guy on my school group this morning, I'm like, if I was going to market again for the first time, I would come up with a micro podcast for a very direct ICP. And I would just start inviting that ICP to the podcast. And I would do what I call the mom test. It's not my idea, but the mom test questions to survey their problems. And I would start to like just understand the market that way. And a podcast is such a perfect format to learn, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, I absolutely. And the way we're doing is we have a really robust partnership referral program. We work with fractional CROs and CMOs, and we have a great collaboration with them. And most of them are solo entrepreneurs. So our podcast allows us to give back to those people who are working with us in collaboration, and get their face and name in front of more people, and it really helped them grow, and it comes back to us tenfold for sure.
So do you find that your go-to-market strategy is to target, well, there's the podcast side stuff, but on more outbound side, you're coming up with a list of CROs, like fractional CROs, and then you're partnering with them as kind of like you're their bat suit with SDR groups and going in, or
Exactly.
how does it work?
So the CRO comes in, right? And they're the strategic consultants for the company. And they then bring us in to be the execution team that generates the leads in regards to the prospecting for the SDR side of it, for their go-to-market strategy. And we share in a rev share program, so that we have about 500 right now, fractional CROs and CMOs
Wow,
within that network.
that's amazing. So how did that come to be? Is there, like, I'm just curious, like going back, because you said you started with 10 people on the team back
Yeah.
in, the early 2010s.
Yeah.
And when you were going to market, was that the original strategy, or how did you guys
No, we
think about
started
that?
that a year and a half ago.
Oh,
So
wow. And you already have
yeah,
500?
yeah. So we hired a partnership manager. We built out an entire platform, but we partnered up with the same referral program that Pavilion uses to track everything. Because the one thing when I looked at it, I said, listen, I referred people to and use referral programs before, but I send a lead over and do an introduction and never hear back. And the last thing I would ever want to do is one of our referral partners to not get paid or not know what's going on. So anytime someone becomes a partner of ours, they're fully in the loop of what's happening with those referrals, and they see the entire sales journey, and they have a dashboard. So anytime they send us a lead, they know exactly what's going on, and it's tied to our CRM. And so that was step number one. And then we started recruiting essentially those individuals, and it's been really, really successful for them mostly. And then of course we come in, and we work in tandem with them to deliver on what their plans are.
What's the referral or affiliate or whatever it's called type software in terms of managing the
Referral
relationship?
Rock specifically is the name of the company. Referral Rock.
And what's your CRM?
Our CRM is HubSpot.
HubSpot. And so it integrates into HubSpot, and then they can track the deal cycles through
Yep, and
that.
it also integrates with our payment processing. So which we use Bill.com. So they know what they're making. It shows them exactly their income, and it then pays them automatically as well. So Referral Rock does all that execution. So literally our partners are making residual passive income every month for 12 months of that agreement. And again, they're very much involved in the deal as well, because they're the strategic arm for that deal. But yeah, there's a lot of them that are not as strategic. They're just more of a referral, and that's what we use.
Very cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where at a B2B level, I've not actually tried to solve that problem before. So that
Okay.
I'm going to definitely try to find out more about that after the podcast, because
Sounds good.
for me, I do a lot of affiliate sales for our software vendors we work with.
Right.
So typical, affiliate link, you just go send it, and then it comes in, and it's more of a transactional type deal.
Yeah.
Whereas in the B2B world, there's an actual sales process, and you have to
Right.
close the revenue, and it's not through a payment processing necessarily.
Yep.
Or do you guys have it through a payment processing? How do you do it if it's higher ticket? Like if they come in and they sell, say, a 5-person SDR team on
Well,
your behalf?
most our average deal size is about $300,000,
Hmm.
$400,000 a year. So it's a high ticket for sure, and that's what we're used to, and that's what they're generating revenue on. Is that your question? It's one of the.
Yeah. So when that comes in and
Hmm.
that's tracked in the CRM,
Right.
and then there's an invoice associated in bill, and then
Yep.
they get paid out through that.
Yes.
Oh,
Exactly.
wow. So that's super high ticket affiliate. That's crazy.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's fascinating. How are you finding that in terms of like compared to say cold outbound or warm inbound kind of, lead gen like this? Uh, how does it, in terms of your total deal flow, how much comes from referrals?
About
Like
20%. So we break it down around 30 to 40 right now is content creation. About 20% is referrals, and then the remaining in the left of it is just all outbound.
all outbound. And so for your lists, do you guys on the SDR front, are you doing list curation too, or is it purely SDR work?
Nope, we build the entire database. So all of our SDR campaigns comes with data. So we buy the data in very large quantities from data vendors, and then we
Hmm.
use that data vendor with based on their client's ICP, and then we build the database specifically to their needs, and then we use that data for our SDR campaigns.
Can you tell me more about that process? What
Yeah.
data vendors are you using? How are you enriching the data? Is there like a sequence it goes through? Do you do it with data engineers? Do you do it with, people overseas? Anything around that would be highly interesting.
Well, we have 5 different data vendors that we work with. ZoomInfo, of course, we were their founding SDR team when they started. We have a great relationship with them. Sales Intel, also SDR team for them as well, would be 2 big names out there. And then, of course, we have others like, co-ops and other data vendors that we work with more on a bespoke, human verified, human research teams for those data segments that we have a hard time, and the other 2 don't satisfy. And so those are the vendors that we're working with right now.
I'm I'm literally just finishing what I call the old world versus the new world presentation. So one of
Sure.
our at Next Gen Sales Systems, one of our core offers is list building.
Hmm.
And what we have found is that that whole world is like coming undone. The
Yeah,
Zoom infos of the world, the Apollos of the world are really under attack right now.
for sure.
And primarily because AI web scraping has become significantly more advanced and
Yeah,
also more available. And in addition, there's tools like Clay, which is, the ability to go and sequence data into basically a low code, no code tool that then connects into these LLMs and can enrich the data with AI prompts. So it's like when you pair better AI with better no code, low code tools, and now GTM is like the hot word on the market. Every, you know, kind of wannabe tech bro who kind of has a marketing angle, who used to be in Go High level, is now coming over to Clay. And so it's a way for people to pull lists very easily and at low cost. So for us, we used to rely heavily on Zoom info. We used to spend 20, 40, $60,000 with them a year. I'm sure you guys spend a hell of a lot more than that. We're now pulling lists for $100, and it's insane. And the data quality is better, and the deliverability is better. And so, what I've been saying to people, at least internally, I'm like, look, Zoom info especially is under attack because LinkedIn and I'm not sure how much you're following the LinkedIn situation, but LinkedIn just banned Apollo. They banned all the web scraping tools.
they also banned Seamless as well. So they got banned too, and it all because of web scraping, right? And so for sure, it is a very different world these days when it comes to data. What Clay is doing is absolutely incredible.
So okay, yeah, so seamless. So what? Tell me, what is your take on that? How do you think? Well, one, how are you guys going to evolve if say Zoom Info or Apollo or these big data brokers you guys have relied on? Do you guys have a plan to reduce costs in some way, or to like start to learn the Clay world, or to do this more internal like GTM systems, or how are you guys going to react?
Yeah, so we're really becoming a data scorer as much as we are an appointment setting firm, right? So we're verifying data. We're sending that data back to the vendors that we're working with to let them know, hey, this is bad data. We're really becoming a human verification tool for our data vendors because we're making and executing so many cold calls on their
Mhm.
on their data that is our exhaust essentially is a massive value add to them. And so we were collaborating with those data partners in those types of ways. But, obviously working with new providers like Clay and 5x5 and Upsell and a lot of other data vendors that are out there. And then, of course, we have our own research team too. So we don't rely on just one vendor like many companies, can and only can afford. We have multiple vendors that we work with, and we have our own teams jump in if necessary too.
Mhm. And do you guys have like an internal team to clean the data, or is it just, are you taking the data and then what's your process post like download of say a big Zoom info file?
Yeah, so we score the leads based on, propensity of picking up the phone. So when we go through the actual callers, we typically do it through more parallel dialers to do it at scale. And then once we determine what's a pickup versus a voicemail versus bad data, we segment out those lists, and then we have our actual expert callers only be calling the numbers that either go to voicemail or pick up the phone in that regard. And there's other
Interesting.
cool
So I've
companies like
actually,
there's actually I think SureConnect, like Laxman over there. There's Titan X now that's out just essentially validation tools that are scoring phone numbers and that propensity of picking it up. So we're not just sitting there all day long making 1,000 phone calls and only 5 people pick up the phone.
well, I'm totally out of the loop because I've never done that before. So okay, so tell me about that. That is fascinating. So what is your go-to? I want to know what's your go-to tool and what is the mechanism? Are they like making like calls and dropping it, or like how does it technically work to verify the phone calls?
Well, there's few companies out there right now that have algorithms and actually tools that truly test it. It's called SureConnect.ai is what the one that we typically go to the most. But we're also doing it ourselves based on just the volume of pickups that we're dealing with, right? So if we, for instance, have a list of sales professionals that we're going after, and we have a new client that says, you know what, I want to go after sales professionals. That's my product. We're going to execute on a list that we know if those people pick up or they don't pick up the phone. And we do that based on previous attempts. And so working with SureConnect and working with our own in-house team, that's what gives us an opportunity to have higher connection rates. Average connection rates right now are anywhere between the 2 to 4% mark. Orem just came out with a number last week saying that they're seeing about 5% connection rate across the board. Our connection rate is in the teens and then upwards to 30 or 40% on some projects, depending on the vertical and the industry, based on, calling people who we know have picked up the phone for other campaigns.
Wow. So okay, so you're actually tracking a database across client on pickups
Mhm.
and then being able to recycle those leads to make sure that you have better connect rates.
I just want to be careful on the leads, right? Because so what we call a lead versus a contact is different. We don't
Mm.
share leads within our clients because, that's proprietary information and we're not cross pitching or just calling, reps aren't being cross pollinated. They're dedicated reps. We're not just a
Yeah.
call center just calling like, 15 on behalf of 15 different companies like some competitors do. We don't do that. It's very segmented. However, we do score the propensity of picking up the phone. So we know, okay, this is a number, this is a person that typically picks up the phone. So we will use those lists and those parameters on multiple projects as long as they fall within the same ICP and it's valuable to ring them back. So that's how we would score. And it's the same similar tools that these companies are doing right now, and they're just selling that. So they say, okay, you know, give me your data list. Here's, give me 1,000 people. I'll put it through my system and send it back to you within 48 hours. And I'll charge you, 5, 10, 15 cents of verification. And then they score the data. So they'll say, okay, these are people who will typically pick up the phone. These are people who typically go to voicemail. And these are people you should probably just only put in the email campaigns. And that's how they score it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm totally stealing this. I mean, I know that sounds like anybody who's listening to me
I'll
is like,
introduce you to the owner of the one I was mentioning. He's a good guy.
what's his name?
His name's Laxman, Laxman.
Okay. Yeah, would love the intro. It's one of those things where to anybody listening, look, you are learning something new every day. We use a web scraping tool for cell phone numbers. And the way that I always had to test was just call them. And I know it sounds so stupid now that I'm like, duh, of course there's a service like this. But this is why I think it's good just to be honest with people, like generally, is that
Yeah.
like even the experts learn new stuff every single day.
Oh yeah.
And so for me, it's like always about like what's the next thing, what's coming out, what's changing, and that's the whole point of next gen sales systems is this idea that we are in a weird changing world right
All right.
now, and it's going to keep on getting crazier. But
Yeah.
because cold calling, especially hasn't been my focus in the last say 12 months, it's something I'm a little behind the times on. So and I'm totally the guilty of like, okay, give me my cell phone list. I'm just going to call and expect a 30% like bad number rate. But that's amazing. And I've also heard from just anecdotally from clients who sell overseas to Europe, Eastern Europe,
Hmm.
or even in Asia, that the pickup rates are substantially different than North America. So I've
Right.
heard like in China, for example, the pickup rates are like 20%. Like it's
Yeah.
crazy. Like cold calling in China is easy relative to if you're cold calling in North America, where these lists are relatively saturated. There's all these spam blockers. It's just a different world. And we had one client who's a Chinese based company, and they said their leadership, when they were seeing kind of the results, had a misaligned expectation because they were so used to the easy world in China. And
Right.
we had to just describe reality, which is like actually a really important thing in terms of sales generally, which I think is overlooked,
Sure.
which is expectation setting. Because I think especially, when we're selling to even SMB mid-market companies who they haven't been through the cycle enough on, say, outbound lead generation marketing in general. And they have this belief that we're going to come in and just cure their lead gen problem overnight. And they don't realize there are constraints in which we have to work, which are just like basic benchmarks on conversion rates.
Right.
And so I showed a guy today on a pitch. We have like 100,000 emails, generated 68 opportunities, which is actually a pretty good result. And he was like, 100,000 for 68? And I'm like, yeah, for a pure cold outbound, no brand salience, completely cold list. I'm like, the conversion rates are like a 3% average reply rate, 5% interested reply rate, 50% book meeting, 70% show rate. That's the numbers, and have I seen 20% reply rates before? Yes. Have I seen 20% interested reply rates? Yeah. Reply rates before? Yes. Is that average? Absolutely not. And so it's part of like just educating people what's possible. So I assume that when people get involved with you guys, there's that kind of like or like pie in the sky type of belief that you have to break. Is that true, or do you think most people are reasonable when they come to you?
No, I would say the ones that come to us who have, scaled and built and have SDR teams in place absolutely understand the numbers or understand a version of the numbers. But we're working in industries right now that have never had SDR teams and are still adopting the whole concept of, wait a minute, like you mean you can just book appointments and I don't have to, for prospect anymore? Like this is incredible. So a lot of industries, especially with the shake up the SaaS business, right? The last few years, all these VPs of sales who've been displaced or left companies, they go to different companies to be the VP of sales, not a SaaS business. And the first question they ask the founder is like, "Hey, where are your SDRs?" And the guy's like, "What's an SDR?" Right?
Right. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
like you had to like literally, explain what an SDR is to your audience because and I have to do the same thing sometimes to clients that have no idea what that is. And so, interestingly, we have a commercial cleaning company that just joined us, and they're huge. This is not like apply, but they're a huge 30-year-old company. They're massive and they don't have any SDRs at all. And this is brand new to them. And so we have to explain to them the numbers like you do, like, hey, listen, we have to make like 15,000 phone calls to get 25 meetings, and they're like, how is that possible? And so we take them through that. And then we have to actually walk their hand about ramp because it's not a light switch, right? This is not, it's sales, it's marketing, it's prospecting. We have to touch people multiple times to get them to say, yeah, I'm interested. And timing has to be on our side, and it not always is. So I always say, listen, you need 90 days to boil water here. We're boiling water. A watch pot doesn't boil, and no matter how hot your oven gets, you need 90 days to boil water, and that's when the numbers are popping. So we have to set those expectations with our client, and also remind them throughout the 90 days about it sometimes. But once they start seeing the popcorn pop, then that's where it starts getting super exciting.
Yeah. In my world, when people want to come on board with any outbound motion,
Yeah.
I tell them minimally 6 months,
Right.
really 12 months, and really, really like 18 months. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, that's like the realistic, like
No.
from
Yeah.
a dead start.
For sure.
Uh, do you find that, what do you think you're the typical, like, where people are just fanatically happy with you? Would you say it's like the 6 month or 12-month mark? What does that look like?
Well, we do minimum 6-month contracts for that exact reason, right? So I always say, listen, we need 2 quarters to make a difference and to see expectations and see predictability and to see benchmarks. So when I say 90 days is boiling water, it doesn't. That's when you put the spaghetti in. You don't. The spaghetti isn't ready when the water starts boiling. That's when you start, right? And so it's the same concept here. We need a full 6 months in order for us to really reevaluate whether or not we want to continue this or not. And that's just the numbers for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that is like, I would say to anyone listening, set expectations so clearly up front, because I can't tell you how many times in my own world, especially in my earlier agency, where expectations weren't set, 6 weeks go by and the person's like, what's happened? We're 6 weeks out, haven't even launched. What do you mean? And they're like, well, like this is supposed to be happening. And what I have found, just generally speaking, is that when somebody is super anal and super intense and they're like looking for that quick fix in 8 weeks, it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah.
So for me, I say, look, if you cannot wait 12 months, like truly just bite the bullet and just have pure faith for at least 3 to 6 months, we shouldn't even start, because it just takes that time. I mean, frankly, it takes that time to, one, I don't know in your world, because it sounds like you have guys ready to go. But in my world, if we're hiring a SDR team from scratch, then I have to hire the SDR. And that in itself is a 8-week process.
Right.
And then that person has to themselves ramp, which is 3 to 4 month process, depending upon the cycle. And we're going to lose some of those SDRs. They're going to suck. And so we're going to have to deal with that churn. So we typically are going to have to overhire and just expect some loss there. And then that's assuming that we even have the messaging right, like assuming we have the cold call script right, that the positioning is right, that the technology stack is in place. Because a lot of the people that we deal with, in that say $2 to $10 million revenue range, they don't even have a sales ops system in place. They don't even have a CRM set up. So we have to set that up. We have a full training guide on how to like train people on that, but
Sure.
that takes time to learn.
Yep.
So people just don't realize that there is like it's the old 1980s kind of saying of forming, storming, norming, and performing. And it's like the forming is 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a storming for 6 months where it's like, everyone's like, this sucks. That script is horrible. Why is Gary not making calls at 2 p.m.?
Right.
And then you get into kind of norming. And then finally around 12 months, you start performing. And it's so important that people know that.
It's so important. I mean, building momentum, you're building the plane while flying it, right? And it just, you have to get that expectation set up. And I understand, it's expensive, and I understand most are bootstrapping right now. And I understand, we have investors and companies and boards to impress, and I get all that. But at the end of the day, like I said, here's my analogy. If you cook popcorn, it takes 3 minutes to cook popcorn. Now, here's the kick. It's actually 3 consistent minutes, not 3 minutes. Because if you take a bag of popcorn out every minute and you check it, you analyze it, you look at it, you see if it pops, nothing will pop after 3 minutes if you keep doing that. You need to have 3 consistent minutes. And so in the first minute, nothing happens. In the second minute, hardly anything happens. And in the third minute, all of a sudden, you got a bag of popcorn. So you just have to understand that that's what's happening. And if you analyze it every 30 seconds and you judge and look and stop the process from happening when doing so, you're gonna be really, really frustrated. So just give it the faith, like you said, that you need to have in order to see that through.
There's a concept that I got from some exercise guy years ago called silent work. And it's this idea that you're going to put in work and it's going to feel like nothing happened.
Right.
Your body looks the same. You feel probably worse. And then you're going to go do another 2-hour grueling session, and the same thing's going to happen. And you're going to be like, what is going on? And I personally went through like my own physical transformation because I had really bad shoulders and hips, and I should be getting surgery on my hips. And so I hired a coach in the first year, and I was a personal trainer when I was like in my early 20s.
Okay.
And so I've always been pretty athletic. So it's not because I'm just some weirdly genetically, bad person, but it was this weird thing that happened in my early 30s. My hips started hurting. So I went on this mission to like solve my body problems, my hips and my knees and everything. And I got this coach, and the first like 6 months I was like, dude, this sucks. I was getting worse. I'm like, what the hell's happening? And then I remember this guy came with references, and he was the guy that everyone used. And so I started going to all the other gurus, and I was like, hey man, can you just double check my coach's program? And they would always say back to me, like, that's actually my coach. Like, you got to use this guy. And so I kept on using him for 6 months. and more 6 more months. And I said to him like, hey man, like if this isn't working in the next 2 to 3 months, like I'm gonna give up and just get surgery on my hips because it's not working.
Right.
And then like a day later, I had a breakthrough. And it was like the first breakthrough after really consistent 2 hour a day type stuff for a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the next week, another breakthrough. And all of a sudden, the popcorn started popping. And for now I can like almost do middle splits. I can do handstands. I can do some crazy like pull ups with 150 pounds on my back. And I could barely do a pull up before because my brachioradialis, my tendons around my elbows were all
Yeah.
screwed up and couldn't do squats. All of a sudden, I can't. But it took
Wow.
18 months of consistent work.
Right.
And I see it the same way with the SDR world is like, number one, choose a really good partner. Sounds like you guys could do that. Two is commit to the process.
Yeah.
And like, trust the process is like the quote you should have
Yeah.
on your shirt, trust the process. And then just let the consistent popcorn baking commence and
Yeah.
then just hope for the best.
Yeah.
But my final point there for everyone is like, just if you're going to do this, make sure your offer and your company's actually ready for scale. So good
Yes.
offer, you're a normal or growing market. You've got all your systems dialed. You got your post fulfillment dialed. You understand the basics of like what you're going to market with. Because if you hire an SDR team or someone like me and you try to like add fuel to the fire, you're just going to burn down the house.
Yeah.
But short of that, then it's just like if you have a good offer, it's selling, you just need to go faster. You got to just commit.
Yeah. I mean,
So
putting gas on just a bunch of sticks, right? It doesn't do anything. You have to have a start of that fire, and then you could put gas on it. So you need to make sure that there is value there, that there is product market fit there, that you are able to catch the ball if we're going to be throwing you some pitches, right? Because then you just be
mhm.
running back and trying to go pick up that ball. It's going to be really, really challenging, annoying, and tiring. So you're absolutely right. You got to be ready. And it's one of the first things that we look at, not to be, arrogant or not to be, a jerk, but like we have to realize, hey, listen, are you ready for this? And push back and say, hey, listen, it doesn't sound like you are, and that's okay. Come back in 6 months. Here's here's some great companies that you can go take a look at to help you get on track. But yeah, it's just going to be very frustrating if we send you 35 leads and none of them close because you guys don't have your deck ready or something, or the value isn't there. You can't implement. And so that's super important.
So getting into that whole sequence of things. Once you capture a lead, you make some calls.
Yeah.
The guy's ready to meet.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, what is your process around that, and how are you integrating with customer CRM? So there's like a sales ops kind of CRM process question, and then there's also just like a strategy kind of higher level sales process. What does that look like?
Yeah. So we boil up those leads to not just hot appointments, we call them, or booked appointments, which of course is the cream of the crop. But we're also sharing interested leads, right? Warm leads, because again, we're the SDR function. So we know subject matter experts, account executives, people who need to start building rapport, and it takes a little bit of time to build that relationship. That's valuable. So we call those warm leads. So these are people who are highly interested, had the good conversation, right in the right ICP, had a qualifying questions asked, and they're all, on board, but the timing may be wrong. Maybe they just started the role. Maybe they just implemented, a new product, or maybe they just hired 20 people and they just don't have the time to sit down and literally talk to you. We send those leads over to our clients in the form of a warm introduction via email and with all the detailed reporting behind it. And so they can start nurturing it, and the AEs can start working those leads with more of a longer sales cycle. The ones that we generate and get saying yes to an appointment, we actually put that right on their calendar. So we have access to our clients' AE's calendar. We use, calendar integrations to do that. And then we book the appointment right on it. And then they also automatically get a lead summary where they'll see who it is, their details, information, all their contact data, a copy of the recorded call so they can prepare for that demo with understanding of what we asked in live recording. And then of course in note form as well.
So I'm curious, what are you doing in terms of like a central database of sorts for your clients? How do you manage all the separate lists? Because obviously you have your HubSpot CRM, but you just have like, infinite HubSpot CRMs, or do you have a central database, or is it custom coded? Are you using a tool? What are you doing?
Yeah. So when I said HubSpot, that it's our for our own instance, as in our brand, and that's what our AEs are using for our selling our own products. But for our actual clients CRM, we have Salesforce, and that's what we're integrating with all of the data. So all of our SDRs sit in a dialer called Orem, and they are using tools like Instantly and Outreach and others, depending on what the campaign looks like. And that all sits back into Salesforce. So it integrates right into their CRM, so they have access to all the leads into a dashboard.
I'm very curious. I would love to talk offline about this, but I'll
Sure.
introduce it to the subject about this. So I'm building a company called reviops.com.
Okay.
What it is solving is actually the data management problem. So, for example, I'm going to use Instantly as an example. So Instantly, for anyone who hasn't used Instantly, it's my preferred sequencer tool. It's essentially the best current brand to go to market with in terms of cold email.
And I agree
So
with
you
that
can send
statement.
tens of thousands. Do you guys use them extensively?
Yeah, we love them. Yeah, we think they're great.
So there's three different kind of categories of products there for anybody listening. There's Smart Lead, which is their primary kind of nemesis. There is Bison, which is a new startup, and that's kind of like the cold email agencies of the world. Everyone seems to be migrating to them, but I've heard some people saying that they're not happy with that result. I do not reserve judgment because I haven't used them in a while. I did test them on a few campaigns. And then there's another one called People or something like that. I can't remember the exact name, but a new sequencer tool that just popped up on the radar. For me, I still use for all of our clients Instantly. Now, that being said, Instantly's fantastic. Clay's fantastic. We use Clay as our kind of our enrichment tool where we put all the original data and we enrich it with cell phones and AI written copy and all that kind of stuff. And then we move that data and the lists into Instantly, and then we send out all of our messages through Instantly. So that's fine. People will start responding back to Instantly, and then it comes into a uni box where it's like a central, kind of like CRM, a central inbox for, say, your 400 or 10,000 domains, however many you have. We use a tool called Maldoso. So we get our inboxes for about $1.80 a pop. And it comes with free domains once you get the inbox. So for us, we find that to be more affordable. And that integrates also into Instantly. Now, after that all happens, people are responding to these outbound campaigns and you have thousands of responses to manage. And then there's a labeling capability in Instantly to then like choose the outcomes. You can AI tag them. But this is where the rubber meets the road, where the rubber meets the road and where the problem is. Once a reply comes in, it has to then go into Salesforce or go into HubSpot. And so there's an HTML email body, and there's also the lead and the status and the task for the SDR and all that kind of stuff has to happen. So what I found is when I'm doing extremely high volume, low volume is not a big deal, but there's natural API rate limits at the Salesforce level. So what happens is if you push in 200 at once, about 90% will get in, and the rest will actually get gapped where they disappear. There is an integration between Instantly and Salesforce or Clay and Salesforce. There's multiple problems with it, but primarily it's a rate limit problem. So in our own clients, 40 clients, and we can tell you that about 10% of the data would just miss into Salesforce. And we're like, what the hell's happening? And we did an analysis and we realized there was a rate limit problem. So we realized we had to create a central database as a staging environment for that data and error retry logic to continue to push it in. So that was one big problem that we initially solved. The second big problem was that even if the data was good in, say, Instantly, once you pushed it into Salesforce, there was no way to create a holistic view or dashboard of the full cycle of the pipeline. So you could see like reply rate, interested reply rate, opportunities created, and then all the rest of the data would just be living in Salesforce, but there was no central dashboard showing a full funnel. So for our clients are like, yeah, but you sent me a bunch of meetings, but you didn't close deals. And we're like, we did close deals. And they're like, yeah, but like, I can't attribute it back to the cold email efforts. So what we did at ReviOps is we built a whole dashboarding system to take the post lead capture pipeline of the SDRs and the Salesforce people, and then tie it to the GTM cold email side of the world and build a full visualized pipeline. So anyways, that's what we're building. It's solving the integration problem, creating better dashboards around the full cycle. So would love your feedback at some point. But
Yeah.
we are solving our own problem. So that's what we're doing.
That's the best way to do it, is figure out how to do it for yourself. And then if it works for you, guess what? There's going to be a lot of other people that probably have the same problem, right? And that's how it starts, and that's amazing. And I'd love to talk with you offline, because those are always challenges that we come across, and love to see how that could help hopefully fix ours.
Yeah, indeed. So how much time do you got? Because I know we're coming up on the end of the scheduled time. I can go for a little longer. I don't have
No,
a
I'm good to
follow
go.
up. So I'm really curious about the data still. So you said the industry benchmarks was 2 to 4% connect rate.
Hmm.
You guys, because you scrub the list better, are
Hmm.
getting in that 15 to 20% ish rate.
Yeah.
That's connect, right? So then now after a connect, there is then typically, I would assume, some type of meeting call to action, or what's the next step?
Yeah, I mean, there's conversion rates at that point, and the matter is really depending on what the product offering is. Depends on a lot of things. And so we typically have, all sorts of averages that we look at for every single industry and every single client that we deal with. And we figure out how we can actually get those conversions up and higher. And if we can get anywhere between, here's how we look at it. If we could get 2 to 4 meetings a day for an SDR, then we're on fire. We're doing some really good things, no matter what the industry is. Now, I have some companies where we're selling a $300,000-$400,000 ERP system, and we're booking 10 completed meetings a month per rep. And with the ROI involved, it's a grand slam. And it doesn't seem like that's a lot of meetings, right? But then I have another company that, this one's interesting. It sells golf simulators to golf courses, and they're like $800 a pop. And my guy right now booked 120 appointments in a month, and the connection rates are out of this world. And so, yeah, it depends. The numbers always depend on what industry that you're going after and what ICP you're focused into.
Yeah, I think that for anyone listening as well is like anybody who gives you like a straight up like this is it, period.
Oh, I hate that. When
That-
people always ask me those questions, they're like, "So what are their numbers? What's your guarantee?" I'm like, "Dude, what are yours?" Like, and then I ask them like,
exactly.
you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, how many deals do you close based on how many like they don't even know, and then they're asking me like, I don't know yet. Now, I'm not saying we can't figure that out. I mean, sales is simple math, right? So, but we first have to look at, to your point, the data. We have to look at the total addressable market. We have to know who's in that total addressable market. And then we have to determine, okay, how many calls we make. And we do the waterfall approach to just what we call the sales math. And then we come up with that number. But, I want to know that number just as much as you do, Mr. Prospect. But the reality is like, we don't know what it is yet. There's a lot of factors. And I tell them this story. Here's an interesting story. So I had 2 companies that are just direct competitors in every way. Okay. I mean, they're direct competitors, and they're both active clients of ours at the exact same time. And we had 2 different SDRs running very similar play, and we were getting approximately 15 to 20 appointments per month per rep on each campaign. And that, again, is not a number that really is that important, even though most think it is. Here's the number: 18 out of the 20 prospects showed up to the meetings for client A. And for client B, 5 on average would show up to the 20 appointments that were booked. And the reality is there's no content, no thought leadership, no blogs, websites sucked, like all of this stuff. What happened was, what do you do when you're a prospect? You look up the company, you try to figure out what this meeting is all about, right? And you go do further due diligence. And one, everyone showed up to the meeting, and then the other one, no one showed up to the meeting. And it's just and that's all on the client, right? So the numbers are, of course, collaborative, and we have to figure that out together. And that's why we look for true partners in that regard.
And it's not just something. I think we're like both like arm in arm on this when it comes to like
Okay.
clients, which is like these. So many clients will come to me and go, they want these, to your point, guarantees of like results. And this is what I just want to say, like, we got to clip this, what I'm about to say, because this is like the most important thing is that at the end of the day, we are human beings that have an offer and a message, and we are selling it to an ideal customer, which is a person on the other end. And if you haven't truly done this at scale over the phone, or whatever mechanism, cold email, LinkedIn, etc. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. It doesn't matter if they've done it 1,000 times. For your ICP and your offer and your market and your unique setup with your unique set of people, all of it is a guess. We can give you benchmarks. We can give you kind of scenarios. We can give you kind of what we've seen this happen before. But until you actually put the dialer to the test, you put the list to the test, you put the SDR group, whether internal or outsourced, to the test, and you actually have people try to close deals, you are just guessing. And what I have found is that the numbers will change wildly, to your point around ICP, also just in terms of like where you are in the list. For example, Wellsite Navigator is one of my fractional clients, and they had 80,000 active users. It was a word of mouth kind of product-led growth company from 2012 to 2018. Me and my business partner acquired that company around 2019 when we were like running into them all the time. But they had zero sales, zero marketing. It was product-led growth. And all we did from 2019 to 2022 was literally just add some advertising, and we rebranded. And frankly, the rebrand wasn't even that great. And we still went from 300K revenue to 4 million revenue just from like adding little stuff to it.
Yeah.
Now, there was no B2B side. There was no SDR group. There was nothing. We went back to market and we said, okay, is there an enterprise play here, enterprise software play? And we said, okay, let's try it. And so I went and I just started calling, literally cold calling, and then just through push notifications, setting up the mom test survey questions of our existing users and saying, hey, what are your top problems? How are you solving it? And we uncovered this new problem, which was exact routes. It's a GPS tool for finding oil field locations. And so once we understood the problem, we envisioned this new product of literally drawing custom routes and then allowing guys in pickup trucks to go pre-drive routes to create maps, which is like something you don't think of when you're on Google because you're like, it always works, dude. Like it always gets me to the grocery store.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, but what if the data isn't there? It's a brand new built road in the middle of nowhere with no cell signal. So we were solving that problem. And so at that point, like we started an SDR team.
Yeah.
I was the guy. And I made the first few calls and it was on pre-existing client lists. And we found, holy shit, we were getting 40 meetings, qualified meetings per month. And then I actually brought in our first SDR, who was my wife, believe it or not.
Wow.
And she was crushing. She was doing 30, 40 qualified meetings for the first 3 to 4 months. Well, all of a sudden that started dying off. And we're like, what's going on? Holy shit. Now we're down to 15. It's now down to 10. And what happened was we went through the existing client list and we had saturated that. So now we had to go start truly cold calling.
Right.
And so that's when we hired 4 other SDRs. We're now 4 to 5 months into it, and we're finding that they are all averaging around 10 to 12 SQL, sales qualified leads, per month.
Yeah.
And that was a sales qualified lead in my world was they had the BANT. We use BANT, budget, authority, need, time. And they also showed up to the meeting. And then the account executive, who at the time was me in the early days, I was the one who had to approve what they perceived to be qualified. So all those things had to be true. And we would do about 12 per month. So there was this handoff. And in our sequence, we have this critical part where there's like a revolving door. Sales qualified lead, it can be rejected by the account executive, sent back, and then retried indefinitely on a lead. And we kind of bottomed out at around 10 to 12. At the worst, it got to like 7 or 8, but then it came back. But my point to saying that whole story to everyone who's building their first SDR team, even with like a crazy brand salience like we had with the driver market, everyone knew us. There's all these factors.
Right.
Are you on an old list? Are you on a new list? How big is the market? How easy are they to reach? These guys are in the field without cell signal. We had to make 500 dials to get one SQL. We were making hundreds of thousands of calls and they're like, that's crazy. And it wasn't because the number was bad. It's because the guy was out of cell signal.
Right.
So I just want to say that to everyone is like, you don't know until you try. And even when you know, it's going to change and it's going to evolve. So the number one thing is you just have to have someone you can evolve with. That's where the partner word matters.
For sure. I love it.
So you guys send it over to Salesforce. Now, do you guys have a sales qualified lead mechanism? Can they back out of a lead, or how do you guys get comped there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an accept or deny, mechanism with all of our leads. So if it doesn't, pass their and our agreed upon, I should say, qualifications, then they can absolutely accept or deny those. In the beginning stages, we do not charge for like per meeting scenarios because we want to make sure, to your point, we want to figure out what that number is. And then once we get into longer term partnerships after our pilot, then we can actually add in, a success fee, win fee, opportunity fees, and we really take advantage of that true partnership and growing their revenue, grows our revenue, and our clients love that. But in the beginning stages, when we're actually testing that out and doing those pilots, they're just able to accept or deny those leads and go from there.
So is the original agreement you typically craft with these newer clients just a flat retainer fee, or do you guys have any type of like OTE comp model?
Yeah, it's a flat retainer fee for a 6-month pilot. And then we also, our team is transferable. So keep in mind, a lot of companies come to us and say, what, I want to work with you guys until we are able to bring this in-house. And a lot of companies in our industry, I was saying before the call, like, I don't love a lot of the companies in our industry because, there is zero barrier of entry in what we do, right? You can pick up the phone or send emails and say you're a lead gen firm. And because there's really no proprietary information or, a specific widget that you're creating or a patent that you have, anyone can get started. And a lot of people do. And so with that, there's a lot of bad actors. So, we look at it like this and say, listen, we're not going to be very distant. We're not going to be, chaining your SDRs to the desk here. These are people and teams and processes and playbooks that we're building for you that you can bring in house one day. And so, the head of sales development at ZoomInfo, the head of sales development at Orem and many Gong, like all of these really cool brands that everyone knows today, they're all SDRs that worked here and they started their career here. And so it's pretty cool to see that happen for them, but also for the client to know that they have that exit strategy and it's planned and we help them with it.
So is that like, how does that work
Sure.
in terms of, so they're employed by you guys,
Mhm.
the SDRs, are you hiring them specifically for that job, or do you have them kind of sitting on a shelf, not like robots, but like, in the background, kind of like being like, kind of like minor leagues getting called up or something? How does that work?
Yeah. So everyone who starts with us starts on our home team, which is our own brand. So to your point, I wouldn't say they're in the minor leagues, but they're not client ready yet. So they would join our team. They would be booking appointments for our personal SDR, our personal account executives. And then they would absolutely learn everything they need to be capable and ready to be client assigned. Most of the time they're on our team for half the day and they're actually getting trained on the product knowledge and trained on the client's campaign before they get assigned to that account for sure. And so we're always constantly hiring SDRs. They're always constantly getting in training. And also, SDRs leave us every single month because our clients hire them to become into their in-house team. So that recruiting function is very much part of our day-to-day operation.
I'm curious what your recruiting process is like, because I will say that one of the hardest lessons I had to learn over the course of the last 12 years in this business, and this is just building my own SDR teams. This isn't like, I don't sell what you sell. I don't sell
Right.
SDR done for you services.
Yeah,
I go in and I help people bring in their own team.
sure.
And my experience is we also had to solve the recruiting problem. And so I created this thing called the 3-day challenge.
Okay.
And it's a 100+ page Notion guide with all of my CRM process, the entire way we like hours to work, our values, like everything you could possibly want to know. It's our entire sales enablement operational guide. So our way of hiring is we go to market with a job post, or we go actively recruit. We do a video screen. They have to create a video. We screen at that level, resume screen. Then we do a screening interview with a mock call with a recruiter who we have in-house. And then we move it into a manager kind of gut check where it's a value-based kind of question interview. And then if they pass that, we put them into the 3-day challenge, which is we pay them for 3 days and they have to do pass a live pitch. And then they also have to learn our entire sales ops process, and they have to pass by 90%. And if they don't, or if any weird shit happens in the first 3 days of that experience, they don't even get the offer. And for me, that's my only way of really like gut checking myself, because in the past, it would take me 4 to 6 weeks to just know if I made the wrong hire.
Yeah.
I'm curious, How do you guys handle that? Because there's so many SDRs that are good at talking the talk, but the problem isn't somebody's ability to speak. It's like the core values of, do they have attention to detail? Do they have grit? Are they reliable? Do they have self-awareness? Those kind of intangible traits.
Yeah, it's funny. I can talk about this for days because when I first came to the company, that was what I did. I was the director of people or head of people, and recruiting is, I would say, the biggest piece of what I can bring to the table and what we do every day. So yeah, we I didn't name this, but they call it Gabe's Gauntlet, and it's you got to get through it to get to the role. And we do a lot of similar things. Um, Firstly, we don't hire net new SCRs anymore, right? This is,
What's net new at SDR?
a bartender that just graduated college that wants to get into sales and thinks this is
So they've
the
never been in it before,
no,
essentially.
yeah, like we did that a decade ago because there wasn't any SDRs in the world. But now if you go on LinkedIn and you Google, through LinkedIn, BDR, SDR, there's a million people. And so there's a lot of people that know, again, a lot of the lingo and are at least been on the phones. If you've been on the phones for a year, I can't train you motivation. I can't train you, call reluctance. We have zero time for that. Our clients need, at the ready SDRs. Now, to your point, how do you find grit? How do you find motivation? How do you find resilience? How do you find work ethic? That's what you can't find in a resume. So we have to figure that out. Now, one thing we do is we do a video screen as well. It gives us the ability to know, are they technically savvy? Because if you can't even do that, then maybe you don't know the things you need to know to be technically savvy. And so video screen is very much a part of it. We do mock phone calls as well. We give them a script, we give them an actual study guide, and they go through the interview process with a mock phone call. We give them feedback and coaching on that mock phone call, and then they have to come back and do it again with a higher up. So now we're seeing, okay, did they listen? Did they actually respond to their coaching? And then we give them a shot, and we call it a boot camp. It's not 3 days; it's actually 2 weeks, and they get paid to be on our home team, our sales floor. And again, we know our brand more than anyone, so we put them through that. And if they can, go through that, they can get hired. And I will say this: we hired 78 SDRs last year, and we had 4,000 applicants. So if you did the percentage on that, you're about a 2% of the people that said, "Hey, I want to come work here," we actually hired. So we have an amazing engine and a process in place, but it is our raw material, right? People are like, "Holy cow, all that for an SDR?" Yeah, it's what we do. I mean, how does Apple treat the aluminum that is and titanium that's going into the iPhone? Pretty damn well. So that is literally our offering and our product. So we're very fanatical about it.
What do you see as the turnover rate? Like when you
Yeah.
actively make the hire in the first 4 weeks, what do you think? Like, who are the people that would fail? Like, I mean, not who are. What do you think the rate is? Let's say 100 come in. Like, so you made the 78 hires,
Yeah.
or however many they are. How many will actually fail in the first 4 weeks?
Yeah. So 62% of SDRs, in-house teams, are no longer an SDR after 12 months of working at a company. Those are not our numbers. Those are just in-house SDR numbers. The problem with that, and the major reason for that, is because they're not supported correctly. There isn't a manager. There's a 1 or 2 person SDR team for the whole company. They get a list. They don't know what they're doing, and they're expected to do 1,000 things perfectly. And usually they get frustrated and quit. So most of them actually quit before they get fired in that turnover number. Our SDRs have a much higher retention rate. We have 3, 4, 5 year SDRs that are working here right now. And one, we pay very, very well, but two, we had that screening process. But thirdly, the big piece is our culture, our environment, and our management. All of our SDRs have a 1 to 10 manager. We have a virtual sales floor. They're on video making calls in a Orem room, not to micromanage, but to give them the feeling of being in an office, high-fiving, learning by osmosis, always having support, making fun of the people who just hung up on them, and then virtually high-fiving the people who just said yes to them. And so it is much more structured than, let's just say, a freelance 1099 SDR. If that's your environment, this is not for you. But if you like the structure, you like the bullpen environment, you like being around people that are there to help you win, because think about it. we're not competing with each other really because we're all working with different brands. So it's not like this cutthroat competition, but we're all competitively working together to become successful. And our company's called Alleyoop, so we take that sports analogy really to heart, and we have team captains, and we have we do seasons, and it's really really fun, and we make it as vibrant as possible, and that's what keeps those retention rates up really really high.
What software are you using for that kind of bullpen video
Yeah.
environment?
So we use Orem for our dialer. It allows for power dialing, which allows you to make calls quickly. It also allows for parallel dialing, which you can actually make hundreds of dials at scale. And then it also has what they call an Orem room or an Orem sales floor. So just think if Zoom and a dialer had a baby, that's what it looks like. So your team is in there making calls within the system, but in a room where they are fully supported and able to ask questions, and people are able to listen to each other, make phone calls. So they're in training mode at all time.
Very cool. Yeah, I use close.com,
Yeah.
and it has the same kind of
Yeah.
power
There's a few
dialer,
companies like that. Yeah.
but they don't have what you just described, which is an interesting idea. And it's like one of those things where I would say remote SDRs can be very challenging. And I actually really like that idea of like, it does sound micromanagey, but sales environments matter. And I feel like, as long as it's like fun and as long as it's not like meant to be onerous, I think that's a good idea. Cause I
Yeah.
remember like when I used to be in the boiler rooms, that rotary dialer phone I was talking about, it'd be like literally like a little like cubicle, like this big. And it looked like from 1975, but we had a great time. Like everyone could hear each other, and we would play games where like we would come up with stupid words we could like say. Like I had to say like something like, did you know like 95% of the human body is actually water? Like stupid shit like that. And then you just have to throw that into the pitch
Yeah. How can
without
you
like
put
getting
the word
caught.
hippopotamus in your pitch? Like, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
100%. Like we think about it. Like, we all, the older people, I would say, have been in sales floors or bullpens like that. And, our pitch is, hey, work from home. I'm in shorts and flip flops right now and a t-shirt. Right. And so that's literally what I'm wearing right now. I wouldn't be able to wear that in the office. I don't want to drive 2 hours or, to work back and forth. I like taking my daughter to school every day. I wouldn't be able to do that when I was in the office. So we have this environment where, hey, we're a remote first culture, but we're not just freelancers, working whenever we want. And if that's the industry you want to be in, like this wouldn't work. I know a lot of friends that work from home and they work on the weekends, they work at night, they're accountants, they get their job done and all is good. Everyone gets their taxes filed and their job is done. But in here, you're definitely dialed in, you're plugged in and you're a part of an ecosystem and you're working together and all rowing in the same direction. But I look at it like if I was playing sports, I would want to be doing that as well. You know what I mean? And that's the
Mhm.
environment that we thrive in. And like I said, it's not for everybody, but for the ones who but a lot of people love it. And we win together. We have challenges together. We know each other really well. It's a great culture.
Yeah, and I think given the roteness of the job, because I mean it can get old real quick. I mean you make 200 dials a day or something like that, 300 dials a day, and it's like you're in there for like 18 months, and it's like all of a sudden you're like, what am I doing, right? And I've done that. I personally went through that for years, and so the thing that breaks it up is the camaraderie. It is the environment. It is the like people around you and having those fun little contests and games and like and then for me, I was so competitive, man. Like like out of 800 people, I was the top rep by double. And I was like, but I was like vicious. I was like, I'm going to come for you. I'm going to win. Like I wanted any stupid contest there was, even if it was for like a, pint of beer after work, like I was going to win that contest.
Yeah.
And that's a problem with small, like kind of micro SDR teams where especially remote is like you have one or two people and they're kind of just lost, and even this like conversation is like, making me think like, man, I might even just like initiate like a Zoom type conference, even though we don't have your type of tool for those micro teams, because it sounds like your kind of your typical offer is I'm going to go in and install these SDR teams at these rather kind of mid-sized, mid-market companies, it sounds like.
Hmm.
Whereas my ideal customer profile is more on that small $5 to $10 million range that wouldn't be able to afford,
Sure.
the $300,000 investment. But nonetheless, the problem still remains is how do you hire and retain and nurture an SDR team, given the realities we just described? And I really like that idea. I'm gonna play around with that in my
Yeah, I
one-on-one.
definitely, man, have fun with it. It's gonna be great.
Yeah. So I guess the final question I'd have here is like this, and this is what we talked about at the beginning before we started the podcast. Is obviously we have a different way of doing things. You're selling me on this idea of like outsource SDR groups. For me, I've always told clients never hire an outsourced SDR group. And the reason I always say that, and my bias, just to be transparent for everyone listening, is that I believe that in complex sales situations, especially where the SDR has to do more than just the first touch, they have to go and kind of build a buying committee. So they're kind of like quasi full cycle, but they're really going deeper into the cycle. That it, in specific industries, and I was biased towards the oil and gas industry, but more technical oriented, kind of not broad based offers, more technical and difficult to understand. It takes a little while to build subject matter expertise and to be taken seriously. In my experience because I have tried a few groups in the past, and I always had a bad experience where they'd come in, they wouldn't really learn, and then I always felt they were disconnected from my sales process and my system, and they made me adopt technology I didn't want to use. So for my world, I was like, look, just go and set it up yourself, own the whole process. You're going to have a lot of bruises and cuts, and you're not going to be as quick starting as they will, but in the long run, you're going to surpass them. But what you guys are describing seems possible, and even a potentially good fit for certain types of companies. So when do you think somebody should use an outsourced SDR group versus when do you think they should build it internally, or do you think they should always do it outsourced? And what's your take?
Yeah, I don't think they should always do it outsourced. I mean, the reason why we do it the way we do it is for the exact reasons you just mentioned. Like, I agree with everything you said, but that's why we do what we do. And what I mean by that is what we don't do is we're not a telemarketing firm. And that's usually how most SDRs, outsource SDR teams look, right? Where it's just, everyone's just calling everyone. They're sharing leads. They're just throwing mud against the wall and see what sticks. And they're just getting someone who can, say hey, say hello, and then push them right to an appointment. And there's very high no-show rates. And like I said, it's very transactional. And maybe there's room for that. You have a huge total addressable market. You have, it may be a low ACV, and you need that transactional. Hey, just put bodies in front of sellers is your approach. That's fine. But what we look at is we want to create and build a bespoke, very highly executable custom SDR team for a period of time, so then you can then take it over. And so like that's really our story. And we do work with large enterprises, but we can go down to a fractional rep, and for those who think it's expensive, our lowest price point is $4,500 a month. Now you get a fractional SDR, and it admittedly is not a fully dedicated rep because you're getting someone who is split on two different campaigns, but it's designed for those founder-led sales companies or those smaller companies that need a physical human touching the prospect, and we can go down to that level. But I will say the ones that are typically at that 6, 7, 10 SDR mark, that's when it starts making sense to bring it in-house, because then you can support them accurately. You have the ability to go buy 10 licenses for dialers, datas, and tools. You have the ability to hire a manager for that SDR team because you have 10 of them now, and the revenue does make sense at that point. So once you're at a level where it's about a 10 to 12 SDR team, then it starts making sense to bring it in-house from a financial perspective and a supporting perspective. And that's how we look at it.
Got it. Last question on just a comp. What do you think like an average comp for an SDR in North America is, and how do you guys think you compare internally for your own comp?
Our SDRs, if you're making anywhere between 80 to 90K a year, you're doing pretty well in the SDR function. I have some friends that are SDRs that are at in-house teams for some really massive companies that are well over 6 figures as an SDR. And then again, I have people who are in that 60 to 70 range who are just mid-tier SDRs. That's where we're seeing it right now. I know, there's PayScale, there's RepView, there's a lot of companies out there that, showcase what you should be making in any role, in every role. And I think right now the average SDR is making anywhere between like $60,000 and $70,000 a year. But keep in mind, there are a lot of different types of SDRs, right? It's just not a one size fits all scenario. There's inbound SDRs, there's CSRs, which are calling actively outbounding customers for upsells. There's SDRs that are just handing inbound leads. There's outbound SDRs who are just handing outbound leads. So there's definitely a different version of SDR that does warrant different types of income for sure.
Do you guys offer all those types?
Yeah, yeah. Most of our teams and campaigns are outbound. But I will say we do have some very, very successful inbound campaigns. We do follow-up campaigns where we have teams that are just following up with the prospects that saw a demo 6 months ago and getting them back on the calendar. And then we also have CSRs that are calling into existing customer bases to set up appointments for upselling opportunities for those account executives. So yeah, we do all different types of campaigns.
What do you think is a good base for an SDR?
I would say at least 50 is a good starting point, depending on region. We have, SDRs in New York City make more than SDRs, you know what I mean, in maybe other parts of the country. I live in Buffalo, New York. The cost of living in Buffalo is less than what it is in San Francisco. So you do have to look at that, but not by much. I mean, with remote, it doesn't really, matter as much anymore.
In terms of like their variable comp, are
Mhm.
you guys are you comping them on a per meeting basis? I know that for your clients, it's a flat fee, but
Yeah.
how do you incentivize them internally?
Yeah, it's based on lead creation. So if you set a hot lead in an appointment, it's valued more than if you set up a warm introduction. But we are unique where we actually do warm introductions. Most agencies don't do that. It's just appointment and that's it. Some actually only pay on completes. We don't do that because we feel that that is based really on the client to complete that lead. I know that's controversial for sure, but we like, the lead creation piece and passing that over. It gives more at bats for our clients and they turn, amazing opportunities out of those. So I'll give you an example. A year ago for our own team, we cold called the chief marketing officer of Ingram Micro, $45 billion company. And now they're an active client of ours. So it's interesting how, just reaching out to somebody. And by the way, they weren't interested when we called them at that exact moment to sign. We called them 3 more times and then they turned into an opportunity and then into a deal. So, it was a warm lead when we initially started that conversation. And it's, obviously happy that we did that, but that's how we look at it.
What's your definition of a warm intro? What does that look like?
Yeah, for someone in our space, it'd be someone that we spoke with that are in the exact ICP, the right company, the right opportunity, and has interest, and they have a problem that the product or service they're offering can solve. But the one thing that it is lacking is timing. So they just maybe started working there, they just got promoted, they just implemented a new technology, they just hired a bunch of people, and they're just not ready to meet within the next 2 weeks. And if all the other things align, we're going to pass that over to the client so they can start a nurture program or an introduction. And we'll continually work them if they like, or we can work them in tandem. That is up to the client. But that's how we define a warm lead.
Well, I think I got all my questions in. I'm sure we'll have to follow up when the AI SDRs start eating our businesses. But so, do you have any like final words of wisdom from all your experience running sales teams? Do you have anything that I know this is kind of a big, broad ask, but do you have like if we took away all of your past content, I love this question, and you got to say one last word to your parting son that you were teaching your ways, what would be the like number one lesson or top 2 to 3 lessons you would leave with them if it was like, look, if you wanted to get into this game, this is what you got to know. What would you leave them with?
Yeah, I mean, sales is hard. What we do is very challenging. I grew up in an area where most, if not everyone that I grew up around had to lift heavy things, had to, smell like fish at the end of the night when they came home from the restaurant, had to, literally have, back problems and calluses on their hands to make money. But just because we talk and think and, communicate for a living in front of Zoom calls doesn't make it any less challenging. The rejection is hardcore. And if you can get your mind right and hang out with people that can get your mind right, where, that rejection makes you better and not makes you scared and back into a corner. And if you have grit and you come out fighting every single time you're backed into a corner, then sales one is for you. And that's what I would say if you're on the journey of getting into sales. If you're a potential, owner who wants to think about how to do outbound or think about, is outbound a good idea? Like, outbound works if it's done right, whether it's through email and working with amazing partners like yourself, or whether it's adding a layer of phone calling to it, or whether it's creating content and then driving that content to the right, message. You got to go after the business, and you can't just wait for it to come in. Products don't sell themselves, even though people may think that they do. You got to go after it, and you have to ask the right questions. Sales is not marketing. Marketing is, telling what's going on and being commercials. And I think right now sales is more marketing than it's ever been, and it has to not be that. Like, sales is about asking the right questions. Sales is about solving problems. Sales is about figuring out what the problem is. And it's not about talking. It's about listening. And so if you are good at asking good questions and you have a great product and you have the belief in bringing it to market, you should, reach out to you or me or both, and we should build some campaigns for you.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I remember 10 years ago, the last thing I'll say for this podcast is 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I was 24 at the time. And I'd been working in politics, nonprofits, that kind of stuff. And I just gotten into the new marketing company that I joined as a sales rep. And I remember asking myself this kind of funny thing. I was like, what is marketing? Like, that question. And it's like, it comes back. I'm just going to repeat myself from prior things I've said, but marketing, I love this quote. It's like, marketing makes sales easier. And I really like that. It's just like simple, which is like, and this is a form of marketing, right? But there's many types of marketing, but the idea ultimately is to allow people to feel comfortable with the world in which you are offering your service, so that when you jump on the call, they are deeper in the awareness scale of the funnel. And so I always point people to, like, if you want to learn marketing, read Eugene Schwartz's copywriting book, Breakthrough Advertising. It's a $400 book, probably is like #1 affiliate, even though I don't make money off of it. It went out of a publication a while ago, but they still offer it for sale on Amazon. And there's this great chapter on the awareness scale and stages of market. And they talk about, unaware, problem aware, et cetera. And for me, like, the entire point of copywriting and marketing in general is to take people from an unaware or a problem aware state into a solution aware state, which does not mean your product or your service. It just means getting to the place where they understand the problem, they understand the viable solutions, and now they're on the search for the ideal partner to deliver that service or that solution. And that's where sales enters, which is like, okay, now you're ready to, like, actually have that conversation. I have tried to take pure cold outbound SDR teams, like, on that journey. And it's like, if there's not some level of demand or awareness around problem or solution, it's just such an uphill battle.
Right.
So that's my take. You can do it. I've done it. I've done it 4 times with literally cold calling alone, where I built companies to $1 million or more with pure SDRs, but it's hard,
It's hard, man. It's hard. Well, thanks so much for your time. This has been great.
Yeah. And final thing, where can people find you?
For me, it's LinkedIn. I post every day. I'm very active there. There's over 700 videos on my LinkedIn profile that you can learn from, listen to, and find out more information about me and what we do. And shoot me a DM if you want to talk more, and we'll go from there.
And what's your full name for the audience if they want to search for you on LinkedIn?
Gabe Lullo, Gabe, Lullo, Lullo.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys, everyone, for listening to the Next Gen Sales Leader podcast. We're going to sign off here, and I'll see you guys on the next one.